In the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor is an alternative continuity game that combines the worlds of both the novel and film versions of both The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogies, while taking place between the two. It's undoubtedly the best game to ever form part of that universe, and if you've ever cared about orcs, Sauron, or not simply walking into places, then you'd be a fool of a took to give this one a miss.
Quiet, precious.
The story begins when Talion, a ranger of Gondor tasked with guarding the Black Gate of Mordor, is murdered alongside his family by the forces of Sauron, who are preparing for the re-arrival of their Dark Lord. However, our hero is rather surprised to discover his execution doesn't quite stick, thanks to the arrival of a mysterious wraith, who co-opts his body and keeps Talion attached to the realm of the living, so that he can exact his revenge against Sauron. With that kind of synopsis, it's hard not to find the story of Shadow of Mordor a bit hokey and trite at the best of times, and you'd be totally right in thinking that. At its very core, it's a simple revenge story with more than a few cliches and revelations thrown in, and you'll spot most of them coming from a mile off. You'll team up with people who you can't totally trust and they're not quite telling you everything. There's a comic relief sidekick early on, and there's a woman whose future role as a damsel in distress is so heavily signposted that a character arc may as well be a journey on the M25. In fact, the game actually features a mechanic where you have to carry her out of danger using a carry mechanic that's only employed for that one section. They willingly coded in a sequence that's solely used to undermine one of the only women in the game and reduce her to an object that needs saving. It's a mission that leaves a particularly bitter taste when the rest of the Tolkien universe is otherwise full of strong, female characters.
You have the warrior spirit. I've never met a fighter with such vigour for battle.
I have no choice. In the face of darkness, it is our duty to bring light.
Overall, it's a nice piece of official alternative continuity, but there are plenty of occasions where its lack of self-confidence is all too evident. You'll barely be 3 missions in before Gollum shows up, and although he doesn't feel like he's been shoehorned in for the sake of it, there's a great whiff of fan service about the whole affair, especially when his total contribution to the plot could easily have been handled by literally anyone else.
Could I borrow your... I need a sharper blade.
Effortlessly combining an open world with a robust stealth mechanic and a combat system that more than cribs from a certain other Warner Brothers property, Shadow of Mordor feels like the developers took the best parts of some of the most renowned series of the last few years, put them in a melting pot with some Tolkien lore and a rudimentary knowledge of alchemy, and ended up with some solid gold. It's a title that could so easily have felt like a lumbering Frankenstein's monster of its various influences, particularly the open world and stealth of Assassin's Creed and the combat of the Batman Arkham series, but manages to come across as something unique without ever being strangled by the constraints of having to fit in with the Lord of the Rings universe it's meant to occupy.
Ranger from the Black Gate.
However, the mechanic that truly makes the game its own is the Nemesis System. You see, Sauron's army comes with its own intricate political system, containing captains, war chiefs, their bodyguards and their second-in-commands. As you throw yourself into various skirmishes across the realm, you'll often find that a major figure isn't far behind, each with their own unique names, attributes and weaknesses. The higher they rise through the ranks, the fewer weaknesses they'll possess. Even more interesting is that, while you can dismantle Sauron's forces piece by piece, that doesn't mean that those enemies are gone forever, and they'll remember how your last confrontation went down. Did they kill you? Then they'll want your head as a trophy to prove they finished the job this time. Did you attack them while riding on the back of a Caragor? They'll ask where your little pet is so they can kill that too. Did you set them on fire? Then they'll wear a helmet to cover their burns. Unless you decapitate them, there's a likelihood that they'll come back and want to make you regret it.
I confused. Killed Tark. Now Tark fight again. Destroy the Tark.
These brilliant mechanics aside, they'd have a lot less impact if the open world wasn't any fun to explore, or if it felt limited in scope. Fortunately, the land of Mordor is an utter joy to explore and play in. It's clear from the offset that Shadow of Mordor was a game designed with its open world in mind, rather than creating the sandbox first and then struggling to find organic missions to put in later. It instead feels like each dictated the other, with each mission and piece of land evolving when the other called for it.
Time to go hunting!
While you'll manage to keep yourself immersed in Shadow of Mordor for around 20 hours, it isn't without its difficulties. The opening couple of hours are more difficult than they need to be thanks to the game throwing you into the world with little instruction or explanation of how to do things other than a bit of a bare bones tutorial. But there's also the fact that the HUD can be quite messy at the best of times, and the menu system is far more convoluted than it ever needed to be. There's even a boss fight at some point that involves you having to dive out the way of a charging monster so that it hits a wall and stuns itself so that you can attack it. Wow. However, those issues were often made up for by some of the wonderful examples of emergent gameplay. This is a game full of moments you can't help but want to share with your friends in case they're entirely unique to your experience. My personal favourite was by far chasing my then nemesis halfway across the map, only for him to run past a cave where a Graug was emerging, which then responded to the Uruk's presence by stomping him to death and chasing after Talion instead.
Here hail the mighty chicken killer. Come on. Come on. Show your father what you have, huh?
Although many would no doubt be hesitant of a game set in the Lord of the Rings universe that tries to tell an alternative continuity story to the books and films before it, there's no doubt that Middle-earth's Shadow of Mordor is a success. It may crib liberally from the series that inspired it, and its story may be one of the most bland, boring offerings in a franchise whose most famous tale is people walk to a volcano and throw a ring in it. But when it comes to the gameplay, it manages to get everything spot on. It's a beautiful open world with an incredibly deep Nemesis system that makes your deaths and failures meaningful, and keeps you coming back for more with nary a second of hesitation. It's undoubtedly the best game attached to the works of Tolkien, and were it not for its lacklustre stories and myriad flaws, could easily have been a serious contender for Game of the Year.
And good riddance!
One does not simply go to gaminglives.com, although they should, it's a quick site, you should go. No, seriously, go do it now.